Today, we're diving into the wild and sometimes disastrous world of ship launches. Launching a ship might seem like a straightforward task, but when things go wrong, they go really wrong. Whether it's a luxury yacht or a massive cargo vessel, no ship is immune to the occasional launch disaster. Ever wondered what happens when a ship's launch goes awry? Stick around because today we're counting down the top 10 ship launches that went horribly wrong. Number 10. On December 21st, 2011, in the middle of the ocean, a crew was assigned the task of lifting a small tugboat out of the water and loading it onto a barge. Based on their language and accents, it's safe to assume the crew was Russian. However, their overly casual demeanor suggested that catastrophe was imminent. They appeared far too relaxed for a team handling a multi-ton boat. As the crane moved the tugboat toward the barge, it was clear the boat was incredibly unstable. Something fell off and rolled across the deck of the tugboat. Was that enough to break the proverbial camel's back? The cable snapped and the boat bounced off the deck before plummeting into the water.
Так это хорошо еще не в рот, блядь. Ой, ой, ой! Ебать копать! Ебать копать! Зафиксируйте, блядь!
Машину заводим, да? Пробили танки, ёп.
Где танки пробили?
Ну вон сверху, блядь. Или там Кинстон.
Это Кинстон.
Ну что, машину...
The Russian cameraman gasped and repeated the same phrase twice. Whatever he said, it likely wasn't encouraging. The exact purpose of their mission is unclear. Perhaps it was a search and rescue operation or a transport job. Regardless, someone had a lot of explaining to do when they returned to shore without the tugboat. Number 9. On January 28, 2022, a fishing boat in Patani, Thailand required repairs. 2 cranes were brought in to lift the boat out of the water, with one crane designated to support the bow and the other to hold the stern. However, as they began lifting the vessel, the cables holding the stern snapped, leaving one crane to bear the entire weight. Spoiler alert, it was too heavy. The cranes almost had the fishing boat onto the dock when the cables finally gave way. The rear crane whipped backward while the other started tipping toward the water. The crane operator leaped from the cockpit at the last possible moment, landing hard on the dock. He crawled to safety as his crane plunged into the sea. Later, a close-up view of the wreckage showed the extent of the disaster. The crew was probably thinking, "We're going to need a bigger crane." Reports indicate the crane operator broke his leg during the jump. He was taken to the hospital, where he was reportedly in good spirits. The company covered his medical expenses, as they should, and he ended up with a death-defying story to tell. Number 8. You should never take basic training drills for granted, especially when they involve safety measures on board a ship. Consider this lifeboat drill, for example. If something goes wrong and you lose the lifeboat, it could mean going down with the ship. A crew was practicing a routine lifeboat procedure in the middle of the ocean. Their task was simply to ensure the crane could lift the boat and return it to place. It sounded as dull as it looked, but then something went horribly wrong. As the lifeboat neared the top of the crane, workers reached out to grab the side, but it was just out of reach. The crane operator attempted to pull it closer, but something failed and the cables snapped. The boat tumbled back down and splashed into the water, and the video cut out shortly after. Thankfully, the lifeboat was unmanned since it was just a drill. It's unclear whether the mishap was due to human error or a mechanical malfunction. Let's just hope they didn't need the lifeboat for the rest of the voyage. Number 7. San Cristobal Island, the easternmost island in the Galapagos archipelago, is renowned as the first island Charles Darwin visited in 1835. Otherwise, it has remained relatively quiet in recent years. On December 23, 2019, a barge carrying 600 gallons of diesel fuel was preparing to load or unload in Puerto Baquerizo Moreno. As a crane began hoisting the heavy container above the ship, the weight proved to be slightly too much. The crane tipped forward, causing the container to crash onto the ship. The weight pulled the crane onto its front tires, dragging it into the water. The boat capsized and began sinking, forcing the crew to leap off the side for safety. Workers arrived on a dinghy to remove small debris from the water, but there was little they could do about the diesel spill. The Ecuadorian president declared a state of emergency, and officials took immediate action to mitigate the environmental damage. The cause of the accident appears to be a classic issue of counterweight miscalculation. Number 6. On September 29, 2011, a luxury Chinese yacht named the Skung was set for its maiden voyage. Valued at around $2.7 million, it was likely the most opulent item in the small village on the banks of the Yellow River. Workers positioned the yacht on launching airbags and began lowering it towards the water. Unfortunately, the entire operation was doomed from the start. The launch became a local spectacle, with people gathering to watch the ship set off. You could hear the crackling of the airbags as workers used ropes to lower the boat, but as soon as the bow hit the water, it began to sink. Before long, almost a third of the yacht was submerged. All the workers could do was point fingers. A miscalculation had clearly been made. Reports indicated that the river's depth was underestimated, causing the yacht to take on water. It remained partially submerged for 4 days until it was finally dragged ashore. The boat was salvaged, but what happened afterward remains a mystery. Number 5. Imagine spending $10 million on a yacht only for it to fail its maiden voyage. How will you compete with Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos across the Caribbean Sea then? Looks like you'll have to settle for playing with your helicopter collection at home. That's precisely what unfolded when the 90-foot yacht named Baden was launched in Washington state. You'd expect a vessel of that price tag to at least stay upright, right? However, the builders, New World Yachts, deflected blame onto the launch equipment rather than their construction. Shortly after, they laid off 52 staff and shut down. The grim reality was that 6 people were aboard the yacht during the launch. Fortunately, all were rescued without serious injuries. According to the company's press release, the physical evidence on and adjacent to the launch ramp suggests that the dolly carrying the weight of the port stern of the yacht may have suddenly dropped off the edge of the boat ramp during the launch, causing the vessel to list suddenly to port from which it couldn't recover in its light condition for launch. Number 4. Large boat launches are dramatic spectacles. However, not all launches follow the same method. In some parts of the world, a different technique is used for putting these enormous vessels into the water. Large cylinders are placed underneath the ships and inflated, allowing them to roll into the water. This process, though innovative, has a significant flaw. It offers little support, making it possible for the ship to tip onto its side. This exact scenario occurred in Jakarta, Indonesia. On a particular day, a shipyard was attempting to launch a Coast Guard vessel using this method. Suddenly, the ship began to list to one side. As it continued backward, the list worsened until finally it crashed onto its side with the front part of the ship still on the land. Although the event seemed to unfold slowly, it was a very dangerous situation because there were sailors on board riding the ship into the water. As the ship tilted to its port side, some sailors managed to hold on while others were thrown into the water. Those who remained on board had to jump for safety after the ship came to rest. There were a few minor injuries from this incident, but ultimately, the ship had to be scrapped. Number 3. Russian oligarchs struggled to keep hold of their million-dollar yachts long before the 2022 sanctions. Naturally, most of them are wealthy enough to afford several more. In August 2012, one unfortunate Russian millionaire simply wanted to enjoy their luxury yacht, the Universe, but a crane operator had other plans. The multi-million-dollar yacht was suspended over the canal, and things looked precarious from the beginning. Although there's no audio, you don't need sound to understand what happens next. The boat leans awkwardly, the crane fails, and the yacht nosedives into the water. To make matters worse, the yacht lands upside down, causing extensive damage to the interior and main deck. This incident was first reported by Bloomberg in 2012, but the article has since been deleted. You'd expect such a colossal blunder to receive more attention, but who knows? Maybe someone wanted to keep it under wraps. Number 2. So far, we've seen examples of ship launches where people merely get wet or sustain minor injuries. However, there was one launch that caused several injuries. This occurred during the launch of a ship named the Reuben Lasker, a large research vessel owned and operated by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Typically, these large ships slide along steel rails into the water, but on this day, the rails were made of wood instead of steel. When the Reuben Lasker slid into the water, the wooden rails shattered under the enormous pressure, sending a wave of water and sharp chunks of wood flying towards the nearby onlookers. Although all the spectators survived, some were injured. 2 people sustained cuts to their torsos and arms, while a third was knocked unconscious after being struck in the head. It is unknown who decided to use wooden slides instead of metal ones, but this oversight could have been fatal. Fortunately, it wasn't. Number 1. This big red ship is an impressive-looking vessel. It's a Dutch ship built in the Netherlands, a nation famous for its incredible navy and seagoing exploration of the past. The ship is not for exploration, but is a cement carrier. At the launch, workers removed the metal blocks holding the ship in place, and its name was unveiled as Norden to polite applause. A hydraulic system dumped the ship into the water, causing it to sway wildly from side to side. This created a wave that swept onto the road and into nearby fields, almost getting the feet of some ship spotters wet.
And in this instance, it made the Norden sway pretty wildly from side to side. This created a wave which swept right up onto the road and went into the fields nearby, almost getting some of the ship spotters' feet wet who were standing nearby. I guess that's how they keep the roads